Okay, so finally we're getting to doing a video on my bike. This is a Surron. Just took it out for a couple of minutes to get some stats. Let's turn this off just in case we lose throttle ground or something. So you notice that on the back is a battery extender, which I designed, 3D printed, and incorporated into the bike. Now I haven't got this thing all finished yet. I basically put it together as fast as I could for the purposes of this video to just to show capabilities of what's going on here. So you'll see that it's got its own display and the psychoanalyst. I know I'm in the trees here, but so here's the deal. So this battery extender is hooked up parallel to the Surron battery. It's a 16S 7P, so it's about 63% more capacity than the stock one. I also have, so the three things that I've upgraded on this bike. I made the battery in the back, the BAC 4000, and of course the psychoanalyst. In my opinion, the psychoanalyst is the best device to have on an electric vehicle. I mean, when you hook it in, when you get the version 3 and you hook it in, when you put the throttle into the psychoanalyst and you attach a shunt, which is what that puppy is. I had a 3D printed case for that, but when you run it through a shunt, the psychoanalyst controls that baby, and so I have full control, right? I can reduce the amps, low voltage cutoff. I can do a nice easy throttle ramp up, or I can make a very quick throttle ramp up and have the thing pull the front wheel every single time, or whatever you want, right? So here's some stats. I just went for a little ride just to prove what's going on here. And man, does this motor, holy shit, does this motor ever use some energy when you're moving. For example, I had Tesnik, which is who I bought the controller off of. They had it set initially at 150 amps, but I dialed it back a little bit. I didn't see a whole lot of difference between that and 135 amps. Batteries were sagging a bit much, but so it's set at 135 amps. Now, mind you, I'm going through two batteries at the same time, right? Connected in parallel. Let me just open this. Just a minute. So in the case, you can see there's no display here because I've bypassed the load side of the BMS. I didn't use a kit, I did it myself. I'm going to have some video on how I did that. I also took this battery apart and improved a couple of things on it. So basically, I plumbed in some thicker gauge wire compared to the stock Surron on the positive and the negative, and it's connected. If I can get the camera right there. So that's connected to the to this battery, and then the Surron battery. So here's some stats, real quick. So I went. What did I do here? 2 kilometers. Burnt 95 watt hours. 44.8 watt hours per kilometer. pulled 133 amps maximum and did 90.4 kilometers an hour, 3 minutes 39 seconds. It gives you a bunch of stats, man. It's unbelievable. But the biggest one for me is the resistance. You can see it's 0.040. It was actually, after I done that high-speed run, it was 0.037, I think, or something. It varies, right? That's your throttle. So, you know, when you move your throttle, it tells you exactly what's going on, how many volts, blah blah blah. So, so basically, you know, it sags about 6 volts, just under, I think, at full throttle at 135 amps. I can be doing 50 kilometers an hour, and it'll sag about 1.5 volts, which is really good. In comparison to the stock battery, which was with the stock X controller, it was pulling 80 amps, a little over 80 amps, 81. And the stock Surron battery was sagging almost 6 volts, just with 80. So when I started watching these videos on this bike about these guys doing the battery bypass and getting the BAC 4000 and cranking it up, you know, to 7,500 watts or just under 8,000 watts. In my view, in my opinion, that's too much for this battery. So the maximum amps you can pull from the Panasonic PF cells, I used to make packs from these cells years ago, is about 10 amps. And it's really not a high discharge cell to begin with. Is 10 amps, right? So if you're pulling 130 amps out of 11 cells in parallel, you're looking at, I'm just doing the math in my head, like 12 and a half amps per cell. So this thing would sag like a bastard, right? I mean, this would sag like crazy. I haven't tested it because I don't want to do it to my battery. But if it sagged at 80 amps, if it sagged 6 volts, it'd probably sag at least 8, which is too much. And the resistance, I don't know what the resistance would have been, but I expected, when I finished this pack and I hooked it up in parallel, I expected a little bit more resistance to that, to be quite honest, and I'm pleasantly surprised. The cells that I'm using in this extender pack are the Eve cells. So I got a good deal on the BMS and the cells because I know the vendor from Alibaba, known her for 6 years, and every time she gets me good product, it is what she says. So these are 25, 50 milliamp hours, and they all spec'd in at about 2600 actually. So very good. And actually, so after doing a run, like maybe 40, 50 kilometer distance, I unplug these two babies, and when I do that, interestingly enough, even though right now the voltages are identical, because when you put two cells in parallel, the voltages equalize, right? When I disconnect them, this pack is slightly higher than the PF pack, which pretty sure means that the PF pack is having a bit of a harder time than the Eve cells in this pack, and this pack's smaller. So kind of weird. And these cells are a 5C cell. So, and I believe it because every time I disconnect the packs, this is slightly higher. Like for example, this will be 60.1 volts, and this will be 60.15 or 18, right? So not much, but anyway, so I just to show you this pack. So I 3D printed this pack, designed it, 3D printed it. I made some mistakes along the way, I'm not exactly an engineer, but so I wanted the height to be there, right? To have this raised up a little bit, but I couldn't fit everything in here. By the time I got stuff in here, and then the wires, because I doubled the 10 gauge here, and did the same thing in the pack, right? So nothing would fit. So I had to 3D print an extra piece, and it kind of, doesn't look the greatest. So I'm going to be redoing this pack, and I had the BMS was longer than I expected, and so I had to design this extra piece here. I ran out of black PLA and had to quickly print this cap off to cover the BMS, and I'll show that in another video. And these straps are aluminum, and they just what I did is I run threads through the bolt holes that hold the bottom cover on the seat, and just threaded them in. And so these are nut and bolted on the metal frame underneath. Yeah, and I think the pack weighs about 20 pounds or something, so it's not much. The other thing I had to do was in the shock here, because you have some clearance issues now, right? So you don't want this to hit this, because that would be kind of catastrophic. So what I did was I put in an extra polyurethane bumper, and that, you can see it's on top of the other one, so that limits the amount of travel the shock will do. And I tested this, unloaded the bike, took the spring off, and it just misses by about 1/4 of an inch, the bottom of the battery case. So yeah, what else? Oh yeah, so I also made sure that this pack has its own gauge, right? Now there's a little button under here. I don't know if I can grab it, but you press the button and it'll tell you the percentage or the voltage. And it doesn't even go into tenths. Just if it's 60.5, it'll just say 60, right? But at least for me anyway, that enables me to, when I'm driving it, the difference between this voltage and this voltage, as long as they correlate between each other, then you're good. If this were to differentiate, then either this gauge is wrong or you got something else that's going on, which would not be good. So for my own peace of mind, this monitors the extender pack, and of course the cycle analyst monitors this pack. Yeah, what else? So I basically wanted to cover the extender pack that I made. Really happy with it. Range, right? So what was I getting? I was getting about at about 45 kilometers an hour. I was getting about 45 kilometer distance on this thing. And now with the extender pack, I can get about 75, maybe 80 if I just in the city. If I'm not constantly going 45 or 50 kilometers an hour, I can get, well, if I just put it around the city, it'll do over 100 kilometers distance. But I prefer something steady, so it's measurable, right? So the range has increased substantially with this pack. And anyway, another video will be coming, and I'll be showing it's not really a video, it'll be a video, but pictures. So I took a bunch of pictures along the way as I was making the pack. Oh yeah, I included the Sur-ron light in the back of the pack here. So I'll be including some video with some pictures to explain how I made the pack, the cells, and how I did it, and all that good stuff. Okay, more to come. So the other thing I forgot to mention, pretty important actually, is so how these things charge, right? So if you look on this display, you'll see, if I can get it to focus here, That doesn't want fucking crappy damn cell. 61.8 volts, and you can see if it focus, 61. There's no decimal places on the display. So basically, what I do is I just charge regularly. Right? And so you can see it's going up. And it's already at 62. It's not entirely accurate, but there you go, 62 volts. So I can keep it, I keep track of what both of the packs are doing. They have to be identical in voltage, and this lets me keep track of this pack, make sure everything's going okay. So basically, when you're charging these two packs in parallel, the way I'm doing it right now, you're bypassing the BMS in this pack. You're not bypassing the BMS in this. And so even though I did a battery bypass in this, that's the load side. So this BMS will not stop the discharge. Where normally it would, stop the discharge at, when I first tested it, it was coming in at about 3.4 to 3.43 volts, which is too conservative for these cells. But but it will stop the charge, right, when it gets to about 4.2 volts. However, that BMS will protect that battery pack. Charging it this way will not protect that from overcharging. So what I do is I usually stop this around 65 volts, and then I'm good to go, right? So I'm basically undercharging it by about 10%, 12% maybe. And so what I would do is the occasional time I will charge, disconnect, if you can see it in there, disconnect both batteries, and this is hooked up, these two wires, positive and negative, are hooked up to that charging port, and these two have a connector that connects to the BMS on that pack. So when I disconnect both packs, I can then charge using that charger both BMSs, and both BMSs will charge each pack, top them up, for example. Let's say they're at 65 volts. I use that charge, and without them connected, that one will charge first because it's a smaller pack. The BMS stops that charge, that continues, BMS stops that charge, and generally speaking, they're at about the same voltage. They settle about the same. I hook them together, and you're off to the races. I don't charge and hook up the BMS in parallel. I don't think, I'm not an engineer, but I'm pretty sure you can't do that. If someone knows something different, I'd appreciate some comments, but I don't think you can hook those two in parallel and charge via the BMS. I just charge, I disconnect the BMS and charge parallel until I get, to a safe voltage, which is 65 volts, which is around 4.02 a cell, right? That's safe. I know I'm not going to go over. But I think if you hook both battery packs up in parallel and you charge via the BMS on both packs, I don't think that's a good idea, because I think once the smaller pack, the BMS says, okay, we're done, we have to stop the charge, they're hooked in parallel. So this pack will continue to provide charge and try to keep charging that pack, but the BMS is trying to stop the charge. So I don't think it's a good idea. It's simple enough. I can just disconnect it, connect the BMS, get them equalized, and then go from there. I only do that once in a while, right? So in my testing, I found that I'm getting enough range anyway. I just take them to 65 volts, unplug the charger, and off I go. I still get good range, and that's how I do it.